Morning, everyone. My name is William Bloom. I'm the Sports and Outdoor Sales Manager with the Louisiana Office of Tourism. We sincerely appreciate you all joining in to our latest edition of this educational webinar series. This webinar series is going to overview sports tourism. And by the way, this webinar has been brought to you by the Louisiana Office of Tourism, the Louisiana Trails and Byway Programs in partnership with Miles Media. And the topic of today's webinar is fostering youth sports within our community, which is a healthy topic, but we'll try to narrow things down between 30 minutes to an hour. But we have a wealth of knowledge with a great group of panelists that's here to give you all a good ton of information. Before we dive in this webinar, I do want to remind everyone that we have some past webinars that are located by accessing that link right there. We also have another group of great lineups and great content coming up in the near future. So please take a picture of this slide right here and access the link and join in and get a grasp of great information and a wealth of knowledge just with the tourism industry and marketing and sales. So again, today's presentation is going to overview fostering youth sports within our community. We're going to talk about the impacts of sports tourism coming off a record year and then facing a year of adversity. Then we're going to dial back into the stepping stones that need to happen in order for these successes to happen. Excuse me. We're going to talk about the knowledge that needs to take place on a community standpoint, of the importance of building relationships and fostering those relationships that yield to great partnerships. We're going to talk about building a diverse book of business and reviewing leads and RFPs to ultimately attract those events within our community. Then we're going to talk about, if we don't meet the criteria of RFPs, or if we really want to diversify our events within our community, building a community event from grassroots, and then ultimately hitting a home run event and really dropping the mic with creating a quality event within our communities. To bring this topic full circle, we've invited some special guests, panelists to present with us from different station points of sports tourism. So we have the tourism side, we have the rights holders, and then we also have the recreational side. So from the tourism side, sports commission side of things, we have Mr. Eric Zartler, Sales Director of Lake Charles Southwest Louisiana CVB. Thank you, Eric. We have Mr. Joey Odom, owner and CEO of Sports Production, as well as Executive Vice President with USSSA. Thank you, Joey. We have Frank Griffin, owner and CEO of Playball Productions, as well as Vice President of USSSA Operations. And then also we had Brandon Smith scheduled today. He's the Assistant Superintendent with BREC, the Recreational Department at East Baton Rouge, but Brandon had a conflict today, so we still thank him for participating with us, but please tune in. He may be on some other presentations moving forward. So we're going to dive into this thing. We're going to quickly talk about the impacts of sports tourism. So sports tourism is a segment of tourism that utilizes sporting events that ultimately attract consumers and families and athletes within our community, yielding economic impact. When I think of the impacts of sports tourism, I think of two objectives. I think of first and foremost, enhancing the quality of life for our youth and amateur athletes, as well as their supporting cast, as well as yielding economic impact, which brings things full circle that ultimately yield great quality of life for the citizens within that community, as well as the athletes that are coming in within our state lines. So our sports tourism coalition, which encompasses 18 partner communities throughout the state, Team Louisiana, has an advocacy department, advocacy committee that identified the impacts of sports tourism within the 2019 calendar year. We were able to identify that sports tourism within 2019 yielded $212 million roughly in economic impact. That's a healthy number. That's the result of roughly 282,000 hotel room nights, as well as 722 sporting events. the top 5 sports within the state of Louisiana, and we know we're a sportsman's paradise, but the top 5 sports was baseball, first and foremost, soccer, softball, basketball, cheer dance, and gymnastics. So to help bring everything full circle from different stations of sports tourism, that's why we have the CVBs, the recreational department, as well as 2 of our baseball leaders who puts on quality events throughout the state with Joey and Frank. So we're gonna dive into some questions just to get a good bit of knowledge from the different station standpoints of these guest panelists within a room. So I'm gonna start with this first question, and we're gonna start with Eric. Amid the previous 12 months, by the way, before I go within the presentation, if everyone could mute their mics for me, that would be highly appreciated. All right. Amid the previous 12 months span with multiple adversity throughout the whole nation, the whole world, what trends have we seen or have you seen from your station within sports tourism? So we're going to start with Eric from your vantage point, just overviewing things from a community perspective. What trends have you seen coming from a record year of 2019, heavy momentum going into 2020, and then everything literally comes to a stop this time last year? What trends did you see from your standpoint of the business? Eric, are you there?
Well,
you hear me?
I'm sorry, I just got back on. Were you asking up?
Yeah, do you hear us now? We're gonna go to Joey and Frank first. So Frank, I'm gonna bring it to you with this question, and we're gonna let Eric see what's going on with his internet. Amid the previous 12-month span, dealing with multiple adversity within, was just everything. What trends have you seen from your station with administering events within sports tourism and administering baseball events within different communities throughout the state?
The biggest challenge that I think we saw, obviously, was coming off the pandemic was just the unknown. One thing when we got back going was we had the challenge of every city was a little different in how the protocols. So it wasn't that difficult for us because on a national level, I was also involved in putting together the national protocols that we had to follow in order to get events sanctioned through our national governing body. So in those terms, it was really, once everything shut down, everybody's world got turned upside down. But as we started to open, the partnerships and the relationships we had with cities were really the key to us getting back open, because we had to trust them. They had to trust us that we could manage this. The one thing we saw was that amid the pandemic, there are a lot of other things were affected with people and kids. I think one of the things that goes untalked about with the pandemic was the toll it took mentally on people a lot of times. And, when we were able to open back up, it was a very big challenge. Like I said, we had some great partners, we had some great staff that helped us, but the biggest thing we saw was that the sports tourism industry was strong, and it was also it provided more than just a game. It was an outlet for people to be able to kind of get back to normal, and in a limited fashion, and it gave the kids a means to be with their friends and do the things kids did. The thing we did see that when we came back also was that it really even though the economy was hit hard, the sports tourism was still fairly strong, because yes, there were some people who couldn't who couldn't compete and do things. But in general, the one thing that families tend to put priority on is their kids and getting the kids the interaction, the competition, the means to be back with their friends in some way, shape, or form that they hadn't seen in months. We saw a big push for people wanting to participate in a safe manner. And the nice part about it was that we really had to change our format and our model when we first started back, and we didn't get any pushback. We had to change the way we scheduled events, the way we scheduled teams, the way we interacted by clearing parks out so we could re-sanitize dugouts and all those things. But you know, the one thing we did see where people were willing to travel when it came to their kids, they modified what they did and how they did it. But the sports industry seemed to bounce back really, really quick after the pandemic, and people were willing to work within the restraints that we had. So I know I kind of, you know, that's a little bit all over the place on there, but you know, it was just such a weird thing that none of us have ever had to deal with. And the fear we all had, probably from tournament hosts to facilities to cities, was, will this return and what will it look like? And I think we found out that real quick that there may be a lot of other things affected. And yes, there still are teams and organizations and groups that don't want to travel and stay in a hotel, but by and large, the tournament industry and sports tourism seems to have rebounded really well and seems to be back on track to when 2022 hits, that we'll be right back or ahead of where we were in the coming months.
You're absolutely correct about that. Even just looking at the last slide where we identified 722 events within the 2019 calendar year, already this year between quarters 1 and 2, so that's January 1st all the way through June 30th. We were able to identify over 500 youth and amateur sporting events going on throughout the state within communities of all shapes and sizes. So it's very promising, and we're already on pace to beat that number on a record year. So the sunshine is definitely bright. Joey, I'm going to go to you. You sat on different advisory councils and whatnot. So I really want you to highlight, you know, what were the talks about navigating through different operational practices. But then I also want you to go into, you know, we became operational mid-May once we went into phase 1 with diamond sports and outdoor sports, excuse me. But then being from Lake Charles, you all were hit with 2 hurricanes in almost the same spot. So I want you to go through that and talk about ways you had to pivot the business and navigate through that adversity.
Thank you, Will. Yeah, it's been quite a challenge here, but I will go through some processes that we do. In general, I think we're a unique situation with our sports, is that most of our events are homegrown, unlike boxing or rodeo, to where, I mean, some of them are created locally, but most of those you acquire and they come in and then they leave. They're here for a weekend or 2 or 3 over a year. They may or may not come back. In our industry, we have the unique opportunity to actually create events and have those locally, but there's a lot of factors that go into place. They're not only creating them, but protecting them. And there's not necessarily a cookie cutter way to do it. You know, when we first started this, the base of events here in Southwest Louisiana, who knew that what would happen when we started the travel industry of baseball, which bled over into fast pitch girls softball, was tremendous. And it really was not recognized as an economic factor at the time, even though we were filling hotels. It just was not on the radar. Here locally, when the Lake Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau and for Southwest Louisiana recognized that at the time, and this was early 2000s is that the top 10 events in the area were baseball, youth baseball. Only the other ones were like the Contraband Days Festival and some of Magnesia softball events. It was huge. And when they got on board and started recognizing that, it not only filled a void on the weekends where during the week, hotels were doing okay with business and working situations, and they had a void on the weekend, and we came in and filled those voids. Now, just fast forward, everybody started recognizing that the market became saturated, and it is really saturated now with people, what I call just event host, not necessarily economic event structure. So there's a big difference in what I call just a weekend tournament and actual economic events. Just because you have a weekend tournament does not necessarily mean economic impact from what we're talking about here. It may get you a little gas sold, a little restaurant business, but as far as heads and beds, people coming to stay, doing other stuff, those events are very delicate, and you have to, once you build them, you have to be able to protect them and not just turn your back on them and move forward and say, hey, we want more. It's very, very important. The economic impact, our facilities, we've got a lot. Probably, I'm gonna compare to almost any state as far as turf fields. We've got more than as many as any state has, and everybody thinks building and they will come. Now you can rent it, so you have to make as a community. A lot of people sell it on economic impact, but in reality, they just become a rental facility, and they're getting teams in the event, and they're selling gas down the road. But a true economic impact event. And it can be locally grown, but it takes time, it takes protection, but it can come unraveled real quick. And when you have the situation with COVID, the hurricanes, they get fragile to where you're almost rebuilding them or taking what's left. In this situation, I mean, our fields won't be ready till after the big part of the season here, and we have to regroup and see what we can put together. But I have no doubt that we will come back stronger than ever when it does come back, and just pick up where we left off. I say pick up where we left off, pick up with what's left and move forward. One big factor also is partnerships with right holders. The local CVBs are good at hotel relationships, restaurant relationships, the civic community. Find you a good partner. And when I say partnership, it's win-win for both sides, and protect that. One thing, even with the economic impact, I say that the Lake Charles was listed as far as growth cities over the past several years with so much industry coming up here. One thing the CVB did is make sure they did not ignore what they had in place. Because once that industry left, and their impact on building once that left, they didn't want to void. They wanted to keep it strong. And again, I'm going back to the CVB that has done very well over time in keeping our events in place, and the hotel, and helping the hotels recognize that hey, yeah, you could rent it 7 days a week to this contractor, but when they're gone in a few years, they're gone. You have to start rebuilding. So how to make events attractive? It's really hard these days. I say hard, all this is work. Just putting up an event and putting the date on there. You can get numbers, but if you really want those teams to come in, it takes a lot of effort. It takes the effort of the CVB, getting the hotel relationships, getting the hotel deals, putting things together that they can do here. Travel ball now is more than travel ball. It became real quick people's pastime. They spend the time at the park a little bit. They're off a lot. And it's now, most of them's vacations are in places where they know that they can go. And when they're off, they have things to do. And it's up to us to provide that. In summary, I guess as facilities, you have to make a conscious decision. Do you just want to be a rental facility, or do you really want to be an economic impact? And that means working with the CVB. You need long-term contracts. One of the challenges that we have is that we're year to year. People will not commit, and we build events, and then they go away because there may be something that's people think maybe potentially better, that we're pushed out, and it makes it tough. Some communities recognize that, the long-term effect, and they reap the benefits. But it's really, really important to try to get long-term contracts and help build the event, and then be able to protect them. And I'm not talking about week in and week out. There are target events that you can build up, and then you can do the weekend events around it to keep the park busy, to keep some flow. But the true economic impact events are something that it's hard to build, but if everybody pulls the same direction, you can build them, and then keeping them productive and keeping them keeping them making an impact and keeping them important. You can't sit on this. It's an ever-changing landscape out there, and COVID has really I say disrupted it, and the hurricanes, but we'll be okay. And as in most people, you see it, Will, the numbers that you have. I mean, we're already blowing and going. Easter's kind of our turning point to where, okay, it's been good, but after that, everything will kick in, and it looks to be going to be a good summer, and hopefully we can get people moving around, and that's kind of it for me.
Appreciate you, Joey. You touched on such a wealth of knowledge. You touched on several topics. You might have to sum up some of those responses, because we're actually going to dig into some of what you talked upon. Maybe you can expound on some future slides. But we're going to round this slide up with Eric. Eric, I want you to talk about your leadership role with Team Louisiana, how you help, with our partners, just navigating through an unprecedented circumstance and situation with what happened last year. And then you had your own adversity with, navigating through the hurricanes, but then you had to hold on to that business with limited infrastructure. So the floor is yours.
So last year, when the whole pandemic thing started a little over a year ago from now, we were actually in the middle of the high school basketball championships, and we quickly pivoted that event in the final 2 days and played the championship games with no fans in the stands. It was one of those things, do we do the right thing and let these kids finish, or do we strictly look at the economic impact of this event? And we looked at the long-term effect of it, and we moved forward and went ahead and finished that event. The following week, I was the chairman of Team Louisiana last year, and the following week after that event, we got with the executive board of Team Louisiana and quickly started working on some things with Joey's help, with some help of some other national governing bodies. We were able to put together some kind of safe operational standards, if you will. And they pretty much followed suit here in Lake Charles. The documents we put together, and I believe we shared with people around the state. A lot of it looked alike because we wanted to kind of send out a unified message with the clients we had in state. We didn't want to do anything to contradict what they were doing or what they were planning. And I think we had a good plan in place. We were able to get events back up and running here. I guess it was about 6 weeks after the shutdown, 6-7 weeks after the shutdown, we were able to get things back up. Of course, with a lot of restrictions. Things looked a lot different. I remember going out to one of Joey and Frank's first events here, and there was nobody at the gate taking money. There was no concessions. The people were sitting more in their lawn chairs. The bleachers were closed, things like that. And you probably, I don't think that's foreign to anybody on this call right now that of things they saw last year. So we were able to get things back up and running. started going good until August. Things were really looking good. And then late August, we got hit with a major hurricane, Hurricane Laura. And 6 weeks later, Delta came through and did a little more damage. It really hurt our infrastructure here and still is hurting our infrastructure as far as our facilities. We have some facilities that have not even touched their fields yet. They still look the same as they did on August 27th. We have some facilities that are being way more progressive. Things are moving forward, and we're planning on hosting events at those facilities over in Sulphur with high school baseball and softball championships, as well as some other events that they've taken on. Since we're not able to use any of the other facilities in the parish, basically because they're destroyed. So it's been challenging. Definitely the most challenging 12 plus months of my 13 years in sports tourism. And we've gone through some things. Joey alluded to the big economic boom here with oil and gas. And we're kind of going through that now because a lot of our hotels are destroyed, and they're saying, oh, well, we can keep these people here until August. I'm like, that's great. But after August, what are you going to do? And what are you going to do next year when these people want, that have been loyal to us for 10, 15, 20 years? What do we do to them? Do we just show them the door and send them somewhere else because you can get some business until August? So we're trying to have those same conversations that we had during the big economic boom with them and really try to get them to understand the big picture. And I think that's key for everybody in this. I mean, I know everybody was down from COVID. I'm looking at our occupancy numbers from last year at this time that are under 20% occupancy in our hotels, and hotels closing temporarily at that time. And then the hurricane comes and wipes some out. So I understand that they're hungry. They're trying to make up for what they lost. But at the same time, I keep stressing, and I stress to everybody on this call, we all have to look big picture. And, it's not just about today or tomorrow. We have to look, at people like Joey, and everybody has clients in the state like Joey, who keep coming back year after year and year after year. And we have to keep that in mind that, this big business, I mean, millions upon millions of dollars. I think, Will, you hit the number earlier. I actually got bumped off the call. Over $212 million of economic impact around the state. That doesn't happen without, rights holders like Joey and people that are willing to come back and host their events in the state year after year. And then I keep saying Joey, like I said, there's more out there like Joey that do events and things like that. And I'm not just talking baseball, I'm talking basketball, soccer, cheerleading, rodeo. The list goes on and on. You just have to find what your niche is there. And I guarantee you there's somebody out there. There's that Joey Odom, Frank Griffin out there for everybody.
Appreciate you, Eric. I loved your response because you touched on some items that's going to lightly gather us to our next slide and throughout this presentation. You talked about big picture, having a big picture mentality and not just thinking of the immediate future, but then you also talked about the significance of having plans in place and being operationally sound while we're still in this adversity, So if anything, while we're all navigating and slowly acclimating ourselves back into the office, this is a great opportunity to look in the mirror within our operations and our communities to identify areas of opportunity and overcome future challenges. It may not be weatherproof, but it may help us navigate through that adversity. So with that being said, starting from ground up, there we go. And Eric, this is for you. What relationships should be established within a host community, think big picture, prior to attracting business, and why is this important?
Community buy-in from top to bottom, from your elected officials all the way down to the housekeeping departments in the hotels. Everybody has to be on board to make an event successful. We try to do that through communication. I mean, that's the biggest thing we do. We'll if we're trying to bring in a big event, we will, meet with the elected officials in that community, get their buy-in, talk to the Parks and Rec departments, make sure they're bought in, or the venue or whoever we're working with on that. Our restaurants, our hotels. Restaurants are key. Restaurants can make or break you in this. So we communicate a lot through the Louisiana Restaurant Association Southwest Louisiana chapter. We actually have a staff member who has a seat on the board. So that kind of helps when we're trying to communicate with them and letting them know, hey, we have the Louisiana High School Softball Championships coming to town. It's going to be held in Sulphur, and we can expect 48 teams coming in over the next 2 days. So be prepared, and it prepares them to stock up and staff up. I know everybody's having some staffing issues now, but there's temporary services out there that a lot of our properties and restaurants are using for those busy times. I think a big piece of this is really the relationships with the venues and your parks and rec departments. I know I probably drive ours crazy. I don't know if there's any on the call today. They're probably nodding their head laughing or fuming at me right now. But that's a big part of it. We have to get their buy-in in order to have it there at their facilities, them and the elected officials. We keep the buy-in there. We keep the events coming back. We keep the economic impact flowing. So I think those are the big ones. The restaurants and the hotels, as big as they are, at the end of the day, they're going to make some money off of it directly. So I think that's an easier sell than sometimes the local officials.
Yeah, this is Joey. I'd like to just reinforce that because of the relationship with the parks here in Southwest Louisiana, I mean, it was very possible that we could have lost events, could not have hosted them this year. But Sulphur Parks, because the relationship that we had now, they do help us out with a lot of events that they really came through, and it was because of relationships and the situation is that we were able to keep events alive. Once you move events, it loses its luster a lot of times when you just start bouncing it around. But I will reinforce that statement that relationships top to bottom, particularly with facilities, doing things that's outside their norm, has really helped salvage events in the area.
I second that.
Appreciate you all. Joey, you said your favorite word, your second favorite word, relationships and partnerships. So we're going to go to the next slide, and this is for you and Frank. So Frank, I'm going to bring it to you first. Why are relationships with stakeholders extremely important in sports tourism? So as you administer those, as you look to go into a community, what are you looking for and why are they extremely important?
Consistency. I think that's the biggest thing. It's consistency and a partner. If we don't know what to expect and it changes week in and week out, it's hard to have a quality event. One thing we pride ourselves on as event hosts, whether it's an event host of a boxing tournament or a baseball tournament or a football event, whatever it is, I think most hosts pride themselves on being consistent. When you get there, you know what to expect in that event. Well, it's extremely hard to be consistent if there's not a partnership, if there's not good communication, there's constantly things changing. I think so. I think that's where the partnerships and the relationships come. One, planning. It's hard to plan when you don't know what next year is going to bring in terms of facilities and access to facilities and things like that. As Joey said earlier, historical events, building events from the ground up are important. It's hard to build an event without a great relationship with a facility, a city, a CVB. Those are the type things that are crucial in order to have good events and maintain good events. When you don't have consistency, when you constantly are having to inform your participants and teams last minute changes because things aren't communicated from the city or the facility, or you constantly having to change dates where your event has been the third weekend in May for 20 years, and then all of a sudden the third weekend in May for a successful event is gone for some reason. Those are where the partnerships and the relationships are very crucial. When you talk about I talk about facilities, but I'll use the example of, as Eric brought up, the hotels. It's having good relationships with the hotels. That's where the cities and the tourism departments have to become involved a lot of times, because in a lot of areas, especially in smaller areas where you bring a lot of economic impact, sometimes hotels and restaurants and different people will take advantage of that, to the fact of hotels being triple what the price they ever are in a city, which then becomes a negative for your event, because people can't afford, they budgeted $125 a night and all of a sudden it's $375 a night. So when we talk about partnerships, relationships, and relate and all those things, it goes more than just the facility. It's the city, it's it's the city from top to bottom. You have to have a good working relationship in that community, and it's people like Eric and Scott and Alexander Shreveport, but Baton Rouge. I'm drawing blanks on names. I apologize, but I know a lot of them are on here. But it's people like that make it very easy to work in some of these cities, and then in certain cities where we don't have that maybe they don't have that same relationship or whatnot. Sometimes it makes it a little more difficult, because you do need someone you can have that relationship with at some level in every city, to be able to make sure that when things kind of go off to the left, that they can help you keep it in line. Because once again, historical events are crucial, and building new events, it's even more crucial to have all those partnerships and relationships in place.
Appreciate you, Frank. Joey, I'm going to go to you. For our partners that are on the call that are looking to build their book of business, that want to identify some opportunities for partnerships that would be beneficial for their sports tourism market, can you identify some opportunities in that area where they can start the process?
Yes. The first thing is make the commitment, reach out, target the weekends that you want. One thing that when it comes to stakeholders is not only local presence, but regional presence is very important, just to where Frank does really, really good at it, managing entire states, to where there are big events placed throughout the year, and the most economic impact. Now, again, because of our model, there are local events every weekend. I mean, we'll have 500-600 once we get rolling, 500 or 600 teams in baseball playing on any given weekend. But those are not necessarily what I consider the big economic hotel stay night events. But what you can do is get with it, the partnership. A lot of right holders. When I go back to partnership, that's a win-win. It's what I consider a partnership. A lot of people call partnerships, but it's, hey, we're going to have blood in the game, or skin in the game. I don't want blood, but skin in the game. And we want the other side to have skin in the game. Let's do this together. Let's build it. Let's protect it. But it can be done. And don't expect necessarily year one to be the bang up year. It needs to, I mean, I look at the governor's games that we built it up to 300 teams at one point. Year one, it was 40 teams. I mean, we just kept building on it. And because of the facilities, and I mean, Sulphur Parks was huge at that time, with helping us host it. And they are still huge today for saving it. So there's a lot of history there, just keeping it in the area. But you reach out, but be able to make a 3 to 5 year commitment on an event to help build it. And then again, the regionals in the area feed it, and make sure your right holders are what they say they are, is the biggest thing. I see a lot of people come in, they make promises, they get a big check, and they're one and done. And they may, even if they produce something, well, they're going off to the next one to get that big check, and they move around, create the relationships locally. When I say locally, it can be regionally in the state, but everything we're talking about is relationships and longevity, and being able to protect it. So
Appreciate you, Joey. You touched on quite a few great points. With partnerships, I do want to reiterate that that's a two-way street where all partners involved help each other meet our missions, our goals, our objectives, and visions to ultimately get wins for not only our community, but ultimately, what we're talking about, the topic today, which are those youth and amateur athletes who are coming out to play within our communities. Looking to attract sports within our markets. Eric, this slide is for you. So tackling these next two questions, what are some avenues to acquire leads, contact information of event organizers, RFPs, and business leads, how to gather those leads that actually fit my market? So this question,
Go ahead.
Highlight what we do on the CVB side, the state side, DMO side to attract leads for our rec leaders and community stakeholders.
Gotcha. First and foremost, I think the important thing is knowing what your inventory is and availability, as well as what you're capable of. I mean, obviously, we're not going to go to trade shows. None of us in Louisiana are going to go to trade shows and meet with USA downhill skiing or something like that. I mean, we have to be realistic in knowing what we can and can't host. At the same time, outside of maybe some of the larger cities, I mean, we're not going to be going to host the Olympics or anything like that. So I think the main thing is to be realistic in the approach. And the worst thing we can do when we're meeting with rights holders is to overpromise something that we cannot deliver, whether it be capacity of the event or anything like that. We go to, there's several sources for us to utilize for that. Sports ETA is a great one. That's the one I tend to use a lot. They have a bid bowl part of their website where you can go there and check that out. Several others. Will has some stuff on the screen here. NAIA always has a lot of things out to bid. Sports Travel Magazine's another good one with a lot of resources. Will and the team at Louisiana Office of Tourism do a great job in keeping us up to date. A lot of times rights holders will contact Will and he'll send it out to the area who he thinks best fits, or he'll look at it and say, okay, well, it's an event that only these cities have the facility to host, so he'll send it out to us or to those who qualify. Trade shows are a big opportunity to get face to face with some of these rights holders and look them in the eye and talk to them about their events. And we've all been very successful in our areas of the state that are active in sports tourism in attracting some things that just make you say, wow, how did we get that here? But it's all about relationships. It goes back to what Joey talks about all the time and what we preach all the time. It starts with relationships, and people do business with people they know and trust. Everybody's heard that before. And it's one of those things that my team gets tired of hearing, but it's true. And I think the biggest thing is just the camaraderie we've had with Team Louisiana since we've created it in 2016. We kind of look out for each other a little bit. Now we have a lot of fun and we joke around a lot, but when it comes down to it and it's time to work, we're out there doing what we can to bring events to the state. And if it's something that I can't host in Lake Charles, I'm actively seeking out who can host it, because we want to keep it in the state is the big thing. We don't want our events going to the neighbors or any other place. So
Appreciate you, Eric. You touched on quite a few points. If there's anyone on this call that has infrastructure within their community that is underutilized and you look to attract events for that particular sport, please contact, first and foremost, your local tourism office or sports commission to see what they can do to attract that business. You can also contact the Louisiana Office of Tourism, and we can get you in contact with different stakeholders within your community to get the ball rolling. If you have, if you have underutilized infrastructure, another good tool to use to acquire business is going directly to the site to see if they have any open bids to bring to your community. Half the time, if you go to an organization's site, they have their RFPs listed there. If they don't have their RFPs listed there, the bare bone minimum, they will have at least a point of contact. And Joey highlighted this earlier, to get the ball rolling, you can just reach out to, I say start at the top. You can start with the CEO, and the CEO may delegate that action to an event manager or championship director. So, but if you don't have a place to start, you can always contact your local tourism office and contact the Louisiana Office of Tourism to get the ball rolling with diversifying your book of business and building that book of business. Brandon is not here, but looking at RFPs, one thing is why this is important for our recreational leaders on the call. You may not have the infrastructure to host a particular event, or the specs may not meet completely. One thing that we advise is still storing these RFPs within your CRM and your database, just because this is a measurement of where we are domestically, a standard of success, and a standard for our youth athletes to play or to compete with whatever infrastructure there is. So the field may the event may call for 4 turf fields, but you may have grass fields. You know, you don't qualify just yet, but 2 to 5 years from now, at least you have a document that highlights the standard nationally on what needs to happen to ultimately attract those regional and national events.
Well, just to kind of interject on that a little bit also, you know, if facilities are looking at these RFPs, get with your CVBs and your tourist commissions or sports commissions in your area. You know, in some cases, you know, we have several events in Southwest Louisiana. We use Sulphur Parks and Recreation, Ward 3 Recreation, some of the high school facilities, the university, things like that, and just work together. And again, big picture, don't limit it to what you have necessarily on your 40 acres or whatever your piece of property looks like. You know, look around the parish, even look in the neighboring parishes. We have an event right now that may end up busting at the seams, and we may end up having to go into Jeff Davis Parish or Cameron Parish or Beauregard Parish to ask for some help with some facilities. So again, just big picture, and don't limit yourself to you know, just what you have on your property. Get with your CVB or sports commission and see what they can do to help you out.
Appreciate that, Eric. That's great information. And everyone should have a CRM. Joey talked about this earlier, customer relationship management. Everyone should have a CRM within their operation to record all these healthy leads and different stakeholders throughout their community, just so we keep the ball rolling and touch who we need to touch. But to bring everything full circle, the CVB, the tourism bureaus within your community have a CRM with all this information in it. So please contact them as a one-stop shop. All right. Joey talked about this earlier, building a community event from grassroots. Eric, I'm going to bring this to you. Louisiana has so much that's authentic to our state, that's unique to our state, that, you know, from different festivals to different cultural aspects and whatnot. So how can a community build an event from grassroots?
I think the biggest thing is identifying a partner locally who can help you. I mean, we're not all experts on every sport. At the end of the day, we're not technically event planners, even though we're doing it. You know, we don't necessarily always have the means to start something up from the bottom. So what we do in Southwest Louisiana, when we're looking to do an event, we just had a big cornhole event this past weekend. You all know Joey as a baseball, softball guy on this call, but several years ago, Joey was involved in a grassroots effort to put on what they called the reality challenge. And it was a Spartan race type event, endurance, the mud, the whole 9 yards. And we had this great community partner, Ali Ayub Davis, who had this vision, and we talked about it, and we started getting with Spartan race and all those, and the rights fees were just too high. The bid fees were too high for us to try to pull off what we wanted. So she kind of took it upon herself and put a team together and created this event. They built a course. Joey, actually, not to tell on Joey, but he doesn't drive good in the mud. We got stuck in the mud and had to get pulled out. It's better than walking through the mud, though. So sorry for bringing that up, Joey. But I think that's the biggest thing, is to identify some people within the community who have an interest in what you're trying to do. You know, the cornhole event we just had this past weekend, it was a local event, but it ended up with 210 teams, primarily local, but we had some people. There was a team that beat us from North Carolina. There was teams from Houston in it, things like that. You know, people just passing through town decided to jump in the event or whatever, saw it on Facebook. And it was for Big Brothers, Big Sisters. So it was for a good cause. But the key is finding that that person or organization or people that are willing to put on an event. We have another event in Sulphur. It's the Park to Park Half Marathon that's produced locally by Angèle Lafleur. She does a great job with that event. It's the only event of its kind that we have in the area. And it kind of goes from each park in Sulphur, from park to park. It's exactly what it sounds like. But that's her passion, fitness and running. She tries to get me to join it every year, but I'm not good at running, so I don't do it.
You should join, Eric. So before we go to our last slide and bring everything full circle, for all of our participants who are on this webinar, if you want to go to the chat and list a question real quickly, please do so now. We're going to take a few questions before we end everything. Going to our next slide. So we talked about putting on events, and Joey and Frank talked about anyone can put on an event, but it's all about hitting a home run when putting on these events, just because, again, with our partners, we help everyone meet their missions, visions, goals, and objectives, but also, first and foremost, is for the youth athletes and the consumers coming into our communities to experience any and everything that we have to offer, to gather that memorable experience that ultimately drives them back, that ultimately has the rights holder, you know, with the want to do business with that community, and vice versa. So with every single of our panelists, we're going to go and get a short response from you real quickly. We're going to start with Joey. Outline a situation where your organization community has produced a home run event. What goes on, and just hit it top of the line.
Well, it starts with most of the components that we've talked about. It starts with the true partnership, finding someone that has a passion. And I say that we've had events where we date, we give it a nice local flair title. We recruit teams. You got to have local support, meaning participants, but then you build it and call teams that come in that make it a spicy event. When I say spicy, not just a run-of-the-mill event. And I guess I'm a little different. I have fun at what I do. I see the fishing. You know, we put on fishing tournaments before. Just the involvement from my park and rec background, and but as far as our home run event, I would have to say the Governor's Games is the biggest home run event with 40 teams. And, you know, got upwards of 300. It got so big, we had to divide up over 3 weekends. We even hold some of it over in Baton Rouge area, Baton Rouge, Lafayette area, and Lake Charles on Sulphur. And it's have fun at what you're doing. Get everybody on board, and we have several of those across the state that we have done, but it takes everybody pulling together, and it's not going to happen every weekend, but you can talk special events and make them happen.
Frank, we're going to bring it to you. You want to quickly go over a home run event that you've hosted in the past, or what typically goes on throughout the year with your events?
I'll give you one, and just in particular, and actually this event is not in Louisiana, it's in Texas, but it's the DFW World Series that I helped to organize there. we talk about experiences, and that's what it's all about. Whether you're in Monroe or Natchitoches or wherever you are, you can always have an experience, and you can highlight the things that are local to you. But in Dallas, for example, we have a great partnership with the Rangers. We have a great partnership with the facilities. We have a great partnership with the hotels. We have partnership with the water parks in the area. So when we bring the teams in, they're able to experience more than just baseball, and that's the key. We've really overstaffed the event, so that way we're never running around short people. That's a huge key to it. And we run the event where we're not necessarily worried about, per se, the dollar amount. You got to run those events where you're not worried about the dollar amount and pinching pennies. You have to run those events where you're worried about the experience, and that's the key, is great relationships and the ability to get assistance locally from wherever you are, and the ability of the partner, as in our tournament company or whoever, whatever provider it is, whether it's soccer or whatever, that they're also willing to be invested in it also. And that's what makes great partnerships. In that event, along with there's others we run in Louisiana where we do the same thing, like in Natchitoches, where we partner with the Alligator Park, and we partner with the other thing, the things there are to do in the community. You have to do those things and find a way to bring all those people to the table, because ultimately, if I'm going to schedule an event, I have to know what there is to do, and I have to have those people working with me so that we can get our teams and our participants to your facility to go to a baseball game, or go to the Alligator Park, or go to the ice skating rink, or whatever it is. And that's where it comes from, a great Convention and Visitor Bureau, tourism department, helping us develop those relationships and develop those partnerships, so that way we can all be on the same page.
Awesome. Eric, I need you to bring us home. Outline a situation where Lake Charles, Southwest Louisiana has produced a home run event. We might have lost Eric. So we're going to move on.
Oh, wait, there I am. I had
Oh,
mute
here
on,
you go.
sorry. All right. I could hear you. So I have two events that are probably my two home run events that come to mind immediately. And one of them is Joey and Frank's World Series event that they host here in July every year. I don't miss the opening ceremonies for it, because it's one of the coolest events that happens in this area. I never know who they're going to bring in. There's one year they're like, Skip Burtman's coming, you got to bring him to the airport afterwards. I was like, cool. So that was a pretty cool 30-minute drive there with him. The kids get excited seeing, the people who come in for it. They'll bring superheroes in, and just to see these kids come from all over and get excited when Superman hops out of the helicopter and starts running towards them. And, they've done fireworks, they've done all kinds of stuff. And it's one of those things, when you look at those kids' faces, they're just having the time of their life, and they will never forget that day as long as they live. The other one was 2019, when we had the USA Boxing Olympic trials. We were told by the U.S. Olympic Committee when they came in August of that year that a city the size of Lake Charles should not be hosting an Olympic trial, that we did not fit the bill for it, and we should not be hosting it. USA Boxing felt differently. They stayed the course, and at the end of the day, we had the final day was the big Olympic trial. This is Team USA getting ready to go to Tokyo. Who's it going to be? We had 12 bouts. I worked till 3:00 in the morning moving a ring from the Civic Center to Golden Nugget so they could set it up the next morning. I was tired, and the lady from the U.S. Olympic Committee came up to me at the end of the day. She said, "You proved me wrong." I said, "What are you talking about?" She goes, "Remember what I told you in August?" I said, "That we have really good food here." She said, "No, I told you the city the size of Lake Charles should not be hosting an Olympic trial event." I said, "Yeah, I tried to put that out of my mind." She goes, "Well, you proved me wrong." She said, "You guys deserve to host an Olympic trial event, and I'll pass it on to our other NGBs." So that was a pretty cool pretty cool day and made it all come full circle. And, we have a great relationship with those guys. They're up here right now in Shreveport for their national championship, and we'll get them back in December in Lake Charles. I'm stealing it back from Kelly. So we're excited about that.
Awesome. Reeling back in, Eric. Appreciate you all. Does anyone have any questions? Might have time to take maybe one or two. You have any questions, just quickly go to the chat box and list. I think we're good to go. My email is listed on this screen, so please take a picture of it. If you have any questions that you want to ask me directly, please go for it. If you have any questions for our panelists, their emails will be on the next slide, but you can email me as well. All right. We want to thank every one of our panelists. Oh, this is a great question. Eric, I'm going to send this question to you. How do you see esports entering into the sports tourism industry?
It is a great question, and one that I've battled with, just because I never thought of video games originally as a sport. When they first started coming out, I was like, how can they do this? They're promoting kids to get out and be active. But it's something that, like it or not, it's here. Like most things that at one time, our first impression of may not have been great. It's huge. You have cities out there right now building esports arenas, specifically for esports events. You have high schools and middle schools putting teams together. It's an actual listed sport on the LHSAA website. And it's a recognized sport now around the globe, really. The biggest thing with it is it's a high cost to put on, because you have to bring in, either an organization that has the technology and the infrastructure to pull off the event, or you have to make the investment as a community to do that. We do have some esports enthusiasts in Southwest Louisiana that are currently pushing for a esports arena type of a facility. It's slow coming because of the cost, really, and the return on investment. We don't know what that looks like because we've never done it, and it's such a new thing in the sports tourism realm, but it's quickly growing.
Yeah, I'm going to piggyback off of Eric. So esports is one of those old, new, old type phenomenons, but like Eric said, is emerging to something really, really fast, where we have these billionaires from all over the world that are coming on as major stakeholders. So the Louisiana Office of Tourism has a Sunshine marketing calendar, which we have an esports, actually 2 esports summits listed on our marketing calendar to gather more information to provide to you all as we look to make a footprint within that market segment of sports tourism. So as that information comes, that will go to our CVBs. So if you have more questions about esports and how you can bring that within your community, again, it goes back to that first resource, which is to contact your local tourism bureau or sports commission. We want to thank everyone who registered for this webinar. We want to also thank our guest panelists for providing such a wealth of knowledge and great information for our participants to take home and to apply to their different operations. And again, we have awesome webinars and educational experiences from the past and even moving forward in the future listed on that link right there. Please take a picture of it and access it. We have some more coming up in the very near future. Thank you all for attending, and you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Thank you all.
Thanks, Will. Great job.
Thank you.